Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsoya. Good morning, Adefemi Akinsoya. How are you?
Morning, Ayo. I'm fine. Thank you very much. Morning, Rufai.
Sorry, I have to turn my head this way, but...
Yeah, it's somehow, isn't it? How are you feeling?
Yeah, that's true. You just look straight up and you see
Good morning to you, Dr. Rubin. Hope you're having a good time where you are.
Ramadan Kareem.
Ramadan Kareem, thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to viewers. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, today marks the beginning of two significant periods of faith and reflection for millions of people around the world. Now, Ramadan and Lent are what we're talking about. Now, Ramadan is observed by Muslims globally. It's a month of fasting from dawn until sunset, and it's dedicated to prayer, to charity, and spiritual renewal. From Lagos to Mecca, London to Jakarta, families have gathered for suhoor before sunrise and are preparing for evening iftars to break the fast. Now, fasting during Ramadan is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It builds self-control, gratitude, and empathy for the less fortunate. And at the same time, today is also day 1 of Lent. Many Christians are beginning the Lent period, which is a 40-day period of prayer, fasting, and repentance leading up to Easter. It is a season of sacrifice and of self-discipline, with believers giving up certain comforts as an act of devotion, though rooted in different traditions. Now, both periods share a common theme of reflection, discipline, and renewed focus on faith. So congratulations to all of the Muslims who are celebrating and observing Ramadan, and of course all of the Christians who are observing Lent. May it be a wonderful 30 to 40 days for us all. Iran, let's move on to Iran, and the United States. They both say that they have made progress in their indirect nuclear negotiations, which have been taking place in Geneva, and they've been able to reach an agreement on a set of guiding principles. That's what they're calling it. And these guiding principles could form the basis for further talks on Tehran's nuclear program. Now, the indirect discussions between the United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and US President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, alongside Arakchi, who is the Iranian foreign minister, they were mediated by Oman. Now, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Arakchi described the discussions as more constructive, while US officials said that both sides will return in the coming weeks with more detailed proposals. Now, despite this step, key differences do remain between these countries, including disagreements over the limits of Iran's uranium enrichment and broader security concerns, meaning a final deal is still distant. Now, the talks come amid ongoing regional tensions and heavy international scrutiny, so we have to keep our eyes on what is happening there. But let's move on now to India. There we go. So French President Emmanuel Macron has concluded high-level bilateral talks with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Mumbai. During the visit, more than 20 agreements were signed covering defense, production, artificial intelligence, as well as clean energy and industrial collaboration. This is happening alongside initiatives to support helicopter assembly and joint missile ventures. Now, both leaders elevated their relationship to special global strategic partnership and reflected shared ambitions on defense, cooperation, innovation, trade, and climate action. So a good show of diplomacy there between both leaders. Now, coming over to a different story now, and civil rights icon Jesse Jackson has died aged 84, prompting an outpouring of tributes from around the world. Jackson, who marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and founded the Rainbow Push Coalition to fight for racial and economic justice, was remembered as a true giant of the civil rights movement. Now, former US President Joe Biden did describe him as a man of God and the people, while former US President Barack Obama praised his decades-long fight for civil and voting rights, saying, "We stood on his shoulders." Reverend Al Sharpton called Jesse Jackson a transformational figure in American politics, saying he kept the dream alive and taught young children from broken homes that they don't have broken spirits. And then there's also President Donald Trump. He extended his condolences, calling Jackson a good man. Now, as we know, Jackson's career spanned more than 5 decades, leaving a lasting imprint on the struggle for equality in America. may his soul rest in peace. Well, let's move on to our newspaper headlines from across the world. And as ever, we begin with the front page of This Day. Now, This Day leads with a report that the Senate reopened and amended this Electoral Act, essentially reducing the election notice period from 360 to 300 days to allow INEC to adjust the 2027 timetable and avoid a clash with Ramadan and Lent next year, while retaining a provision permitting manual collation where electronic transmission fails after. This was passed after a 55 to 15 vote. Now, the House of Representatives rescinded its earlier stance on mandatory real-time electronic transmission to align with the Senate, which prompted a walkout by opposition lawmakers, and we saw the chaos that ensued thereafter. Well, let's take a look at the New Telegraph this morning. The New Telegraph does report that the Independent National Electoral Commission has declared readiness for Saturday's FCT area council elections, and they've been ensuring the public that results will be transmitted electronically in real time. The New Telegraph also reports that the House of Representatives says Nigeria loses about 8 trillion naira every year to tax waivers and concessions. Let's take a look at the Daily Independent this morning. The Daily Independent reports that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has launched the Nigeria Industrial Policy 2025, saying that his administration will be judged by the factories built, the jobs created, and the exports expanded, not by the number of policies announced. That is their headline there. And moving on to the Daily Sun this morning, the Daily Sun reports that Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, FAN, as we usually abbreviate them, has banned cash transactions across Nigerian airports, directing all payments to be made electronically in line with the federal government's reinforced cashless policy. Now, the managing director, Olubunmi Kuku, said that departments must fully phase out cash collections by the 29th of February or face sanctions. Now, let's take a look at The Guardian this morning. The Guardian reports that experts have raised alarm over a growing drug problem in Nigeria and across Africa, with analysts saying West Africa is increasingly a gateway for cocaine entering from Latin America, while South Africa has become a major hotspot for methamphetamines abuse. Thank you, Rufai. Now, that brings us also similarly to a story just across the bottom here, and we've been following this story from its inception, and it's reporting that 10,000 police officers here in Lagos State have benefited from Governor Sanwo-Olu's free eye care initiative. This is just another offshoot of the state government's efforts to make road safety for drivers and cleaning our police officers safer for us all. Let's take a look at the Vanguard this morning. The Vanguard does report that a Southeast traditional ruler, Dr. Lawrence Agubuzu, has urged President Tinubu to either release IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu or return him to Kenya. And he says that he should do so because growing unrest in his region is starting to become harder to control. Now, he compared Kanu to Yoruba activist Sunday Igboho, and he goes on to say that Kanu was obviously reportedly arrested by Interpol in Kenya, and then he was brought back to Nigeria in 2021, and he feels as though he should be sent back. As we know, Nnamdi Kanu was sentenced to life imprisonment on terrorism charges and remains in Sokoto prison while appealing his conviction. Let's take a look at our UK papers this morning. We start off with the Daily Mail. And the Daily Mail leads on Essex Police confirming that it is assessing information around private flights to and from Stansted Airport following the release of the Epstein files. So this is just another example of another British police force jumping in on these Epstein files. When we look at the UK Guardian, it is again bringing us to date with the loss of Reverend Jesse Jackson. That is their headline story. It does dedicate its front page to his life, to his death, and to his honor. So those are your newspaper headlines and your world brief. Dr. Rubin, since you're so far away from us, let's start with you.
Oh, okay. You want to start with me? Okay. Today, Ramadan starts. Lent also starts today in a very interesting, don't let us say coincidence, in a very interesting overlap. And it is also noteworthy that it is around this time that the Lunar New Year has also started in the Asian countries, Japan, China. Well, that is a bit different because that is celebratory. But the religious festivals of Ramadan and Lent carry a certain special kind of significance. Now, the two religions are coinciding at a period where both religions are talking about sacrifice. Both religions are talking about, self-denial. Both religions are talking about good neighborliness. The theme of it is about don't be self-centered. When the Muslims begin fasting, and they will fast for 29, 30 days, there's a lot of a strong sense of community. When the Christians do Lent, there's also a lot of emphasis of doing good. So if you look at the two religions, basically, they talk about tolerance. They talk about sacrifice. They talk about communion with God. They talk about, following the example of the teachings. Now, when the prophet, when he got the Holy Quran, the significance of Ramadan is that this is considered the holy month, the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, when the prophet got the revelation about the Quran. He lived in a community where there were persons of other faiths, and Islam preached unity, good neighborliness. Jesus Christ also lived in a community, he was Jewish. He lived in a community where there were Greeks, where there were Egyptians, and other faiths. In fact, the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, lived in a polytheistic society, and yet he preached the unity of persons. He preached tolerance. So the important message of this Ramadan and Lent overlapping is about, loving your neighbor. And I hope that during this period, Christians and Muslims will talk to one another at a time of strife and conflict and a lot of ideological conflict around religion all over the world. Interreligious dialogue is very important. Two statements that are important. The Sultan of Sokoto, who is the leader of the faithful in Nigeria, said that people should use this period for introspection. And he also expressed that during this period, people will try not to promote violence when he talked about insecurity. The Pope Leo XIV, also preached mutual understanding and the fact that this is not a period when people will be saying ill of other people, not even television commentators are expected to speak ill of other people, whether they are living or dead. But the whole point is about this mutual understanding, this interreligious cooperation, so that there will be greater peace in the world. And I hope that on both sides, people will take this to heart. As for the case of Iran, well, Iran is saying that a lot of work still has to be done. That's the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran. The United States, I think President Trump says progress has been made. And then they are to meet again to have another dialogue in 2 weeks' time. But it's a developing story because they cannot agree. They may say they have guiding principles. They are not agreed on the fundamentals. And that is why the U.S. has dispatched the SS Abraham Lincoln and a flotilla of warfare assets in the direction. That is why Iran has also closed down the Strait of Hormuz and is doing maritime drill in that region. But we hope that at the end of the day, good sense will prevail. As for Jesse Jackson, well, Reverend Jesse Jackson will always be remembered as a voice of courage, as a promoter of justice, as a man who believed in the well-being of other communities, as a major international diplomat for the United States, spreading goodwill all over the world, be it in Iraq or Syria or Serbia or even Nigeria, which he visited many times and interacting with many Nigerians. He was 84 when he said he was not born with a silver spoon. He said he was born with a shovel in his hands, which means circumstances of birth will make no difference if you are a man who has the goodness in you, as President Trump was referring to, and then you can make a difference. He was a man who made a lot of difference, and he was a man who became an icon for civil rights movement, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And in fact, it was the front runner, the forerunner for Barack Obama, President Barack Obama, when he eventually emerged as president in 2009, Jesse Jackson having tried to be president on the platform of the Democratic Party in 1984 and 1988.
Indeed. Thank you, Dr.
So
Reuben.
I will merge the story about Lent with that of Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson's life typified unity, just like the Christians and Muslims are having their fasting period, their denial period at a time. He was a man that denied himself. After walking the Edmund Pettus Bridge, after being there with Martin Luther King when he died, he kept on fighting for voters' rights. And the sad thing about America today is that most of the rights he fought for are the things that Trump is trying to change today. He was a man of convictions, and I'll tell you something very important about him. When he tried to run in '84 and he came third to Walter Mondale, that ticket, he supported that ticket wholeheartedly because that '84 ticket also had Gerardo Fernando, a woman, to be a vice presidential candidate for the very first time. Guess what Jesse Jackson did? He didn't feel sad, but he mobilized the Democratic Party. He ensured that over 1 million people registered to vote. And that's why the Democratic Party in the 1986 midterm did so well that the New York Times said that was the end of Reaganism. He didn't get upset. He decided to get everything. And that's why when he vied in '88 and even came second, he kept on working for the interests of the Democratic Party, even up to Clinton's re-election. And it goes back to the lessons of the fasting and the Lent period, that despite the hurt you might feel, you must never stop believing in the essence of humanity. He would also say boldly, I am somebody. You know why he said that? He said, I am somebody because his mother was not even married to his father when they gave birth to him. His mother was 16-year-old, had intercourse with her neighbor, and they birthed him, and they used to tease him in school because he was a nobody. What does this true faith, Christianity and Islam, preach? It preaches that you are somebody in Christ. It preaches that you're somebody in your faith in the Almighty Allah. And it preaches perseverance. When you look at the message of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's always a talk of perseverance, and that's what typified the life of Jesse Jackson. So I hope our politicians of today learn the lessons.
All right, very briefly, I'll stay in Nigeria. Yes, I did mention earlier in the show that, you know, today marks a fasting season. First, the fasting season for Muslims and Christians, mainly Roman Catholics. I don't think the Pentecostals and the Baptists also, you know, participate in this particular fast. And, you know, as a nation, we are a very religious nation. At times like this on the streets, you'd see some people with the black ashes on their forehead, having gone, you know, to mark, oh, we can see that there. And then for the Muslims, you see, you know, the waking up in the morning to observe, you know, the
Fajr prayers.
Yes, prayers, and to, you know, I mean, even waking to eat to
Sorry.
just before the
Yes.
salat, yeah, before the day starts. But when it comes to actions and what we do, it doesn't quite translate. And that's why I'm glad that today's message is focused more on character and actions rather than religious observance. So that we actually, when we talk about a holy month, we look at the Lent period, we're actually really doing what, you know, is prescribed by the holy books in the faith. So that's one thing I want to say. Now, also touching on yesterday, part of the Electoral Amendment Act was extending the time or shortening the period, extension notice period by INEC to accommodate the religious fasts of Ramadan and Lent. And yesterday I asked a question around, I believe that Nigeria still is a secular state, and that if we continue to do this, it is going down a rabbit hole. By the time we begin to adjust our election cycles or constitutional requirements based on religious observations, then we might have a challenge in our hands, and we cannot claim to say that we're a secular state. I would have preferred for religion to stay out of the process, because I did have conversations with, you know, particularly those who, you know, of the Muslim faith, and they said you are allowed to work during the Ramadan period. It's just that you don't want to task yourself or stress yourself. What should have been done is to ensure the efficiency of INEC, to ensure that people don't have to go to the polling booth and waste, you know, spend so much time, get stressed and tired, rather than adjusting the dates, because it's one now. In the future, we'll keep on making demands around, you know, we saw it with Oro and all manner of things in the last elections. Let's keep it out of the constitution. Nigeria remains a secular state. But I mean, we'll hopefully take more stories in the course of today's show. Thank you. As always, Adefemi, for bringing us in a World Brief this morning and newspaper review.